Vehicle inspection, take 7. If we make a mistake here, we get to do it again. Not so with a vehicle inspection. You may not get a second chance after you hit the road. In this segment, we're going to review the proper way to conduct a DOT-mandated vehicle inspection. A full vehicle inspection can take as much as 30 minutes to complete if done properly, and it's worth every second. A thorough pre-trip or vehicle inspection is a vital first step before beginning your workday. Finding and correcting an issue before it can cause harm is what differentiates a professional driver from a steering wheel holder. Protecting the motoring public is paramount, and every effort must be taken to prevent injuries to both you, the driver, and the public. Remember, you may not get a second chance, so be safe, be professional. It's always better to find existing problems before hitting the road. Let's get started.
Now, on to the proper way to perform a good, solid pre-trip inspection. It will be vital to do it the same way every time. If you'll notice that in a cockpit of a large commercial airliner, there are usually 2 seasoned pilots using a checklist to go through their pre-trip inspection. One reads from the list, the other one actually does the checking to ensure that the task has been completed. These pilots have as much as 30 years experience, and they still use a checklist so that they don't forget something. They are meticulous in how they perform their pre-trips, and there is no good reason you shouldn't do the same. The importance of checking to make sure that everything is road ready can mean the difference between safe and a successful journey, and one that is ripe with problems that can cause harm to both the driver and the motoring public. Okay, are we ready? Then let's get started. First, as our driver approaches the vehicle, he looks for any abnormalities that jump out. Is there anything that looks out of place or slightly off kilter? He bends down and looks underneath the tractor and trailer. Is there anything leaking, or is there puddles where there shouldn't be? Is the vehicle leaning one way or the other? Sometimes a potential problem will jump out at you without you really having to look for it. Many times, though, it's not that easy. Once in the cab of the tractor, he has checked the seat, adjusted in proper air cushion. It's time to check everything else. All those knobs, buttons, and gauges are there for a reason. So let's make sure that everything is in proper working order. Check the following: temp gauge, voltmeter, air gauge, mirrors, both drivers and passenger sides, windshield, turning indicators, haz lights, power steering, wiper, washer, city horn and air horn, air brakes, DEF gauge, oil gauge, fuel tank. Once our driver has completed the pre-tripping the inside of the tractor, it's time to attack the outside and under the hood. Next, release the hood latches on the driver's side and then over to the passenger side. Now, our driver steps to the front of the tractor and gives a gentle tug on the hood. Should just ease over so that it can begin the pre-trip inspection of the engine and other areas. First thing he's going to look over are the tires and the wheel assembly. He checks to see if the rubber around the outside has good tread depth and is it free of blemishes, knots, cuts, bubbles, punctures, abrasions, or anything that may appear good operation. Also, he is checking for even wear on the tire. He checks the rim for any cracks or any other damage. He will check the lug nuts for rust, which could indicate a loose nut. He will also put hands on each lug nut to check for looseness. He will check the center of the wheel assembly to ensure that there are no leaks and that all is secure and proper. Now for engine proper. He looks over the hoses and makes sure they are not loose or that there are no cracks or splits and that they are secure and that there are no leaks of any kind. Next, he looks over the wires for anything that might be loose or worn. He checks cables and harnesses for any issues, such as something being loose or worn or has abrasions. Next, he looks over the steering column and checks to ensure it's secure. He looks over the nuts and bolts, checking for secureness or to see if anything is missing. He looks at the fuel filter, making sure it's secured properly and that there is no water in the filter. He checks over the oil filter and the oil dipstick to make sure that there is proper amount of oil. Then he gives a tug and shakes on the shocks to make sure that they are attached properly. Then a quick look over the leaf springs, hinges, and brake calipers. The most important part of a good, thorough pre-trip inspection is to put hands on everything to ensure that there is nothing that is or coming loose, leaking, slipping, worn, or in any way needs maintenance. If he finds anything that is out of sorts, he will make sure that he gets that repaired before he hits the road. Better to have an issue addressed while not moving than to find out the hard way that there's have a problem while going down the road. Now on to the other side of the engine. He checks the frame for any cracks or loose nuts and bolts or anything that looks out of order. He also is checking the shocks on this side as well. He gives a quick tug on the wires and hoses on this side as well, looking for potential problems. He checks the turbo for any issues in the air intake and radiator hoses to make sure it is good and not leaking or no cracks or abrasions. He checks the coolant level to make sure it is where it needs to be. He also checks all coolant hoses to make sure that they are leak-free and secure. Now that the thorough pre-trip of the engine compartment has been completed, he comes around to lower the hood and make sure that both sides are secure with the hood latch and continues with the remaining part of his pre-trip inspection. He checks the lights are clean and working properly. He checks the fuel tank for securement and that the fuel cap is properly attached. Our driver begins his walk around by checking his hoses and making sure that they are secured to the hose rack. Then he checks the tires for impediments that may be stuck between the tires. Then he checks the lug nuts and tread depth. He also checks for any cuts, abrasions, bubbles, or other abnormalities. Then he checks the spring hangers, shocks, and airbags. Next comes the mud flaps for securement and for reflective tape on the bracket. Then the tail lights on the tractor. Next, he ensures that the document holder is secure and the registration is not expired and complete. Now he checks both the dolly legs and the handle is secure. He checks the straps in the toolbox for securement, and the side marker lights are clean and working properly. He checks the pistons for leaks in the rear trailer lights, that they are clean and in proper working order. He checks to see that the license plate is proper and attached. And that the ICC bumper is in proper position. Then he checks the mud flaps for securement and reflective tape. Then he walks up to the passenger side of the trailer and repeats the process, checking tires and fenders and lights to ensure that everything is in proper working order. He checks the side of the trailer for reflective tape. Then as he approaches the passenger side of the tractor, he checks the pump and compressor for securement and leaks. He checks the fuel tank for securement and that the fuel cap is properly attached. He checks the passenger side steps to ensure that they are securely attached. That completes the pre-trip walk-around inspection.
Loading and unloading a roll-off container can be kind of tricky if you've never operated one before. Safety is always the main concern when working around hydraulics or any other equipment. In this segment, we're going to demonstrate the proper way to load and unload a double rail trailer.
Loading a box onto a roll-off trailer. The following information contains guidelines for operating the roll-off trailer. These comments are not intended to exhaust every possible situation that could arise while operating a hoist, but are intended to promote safe operation. Professional drivers, this segment will deal with the proper way to load a box onto a roll-off trailer. It cannot be emphasized enough how important it is to be very aware of all the safety issues and take extra care and precaution when loading or unloading a box. Before beginning any task, our driver always remembers to don the proper PPE, personal protective equipment, to help ensure safety while on the job. The next thing our driver does is he dons his PPE, or personal protective equipment. Again, this is done for safety and protection of our driver. The first thing our driver does is connect the hydraulic hoses that are on both sides of the trailer. It's important to make sure that you have a good seal on the hoses, as this will make your job so much easier. Then our driver goes back into the cab and begins the PTO process that will charge all the hydraulic equipment. Next, our driver will align his truck and trailer with the box to be loaded using his mirrors and rear tires to ensure that the box will slide up on the rail properly. It's always best practice to get out and look and make sure that the box and rails are properly lined up. This will save you lots of time and make the job much easier. Once the task has been completed, using the valve controls, lower the rails until they are touching the ground. Then, with the wheels and the rails aligned, connect the cable from the trailer to the hook on the box. Make sure that this is done properly. Again, it must be stressed how important safety is. At the end of the day, you want to go home to your family, safe and sound with no injuries. Then, back the truck and trailer up to the point where the wheels of the box and the rails are touching. This can take some getting used to get it done precisely, but with practice you'll get better. Now with the cable properly attached to the box, head over to the valve controls and slowly activate the cable pulley so that the cable begins to tighten and pull the box onto the rails. Once the box begins to climb on the rails, it is time to start the process of lowering the rails in conjunction with rolling in the cables, keeping as much of the rails under the box as possible. Take this nice and slow. Maintain proper balance. Once the box has climbed onto the rail and the rail has been lowered to the trailer, pull the box forward a bit and then change the cable from the pulling cable to the securing cable. Remember to always use 3 points of contact when mounting or dismounting equipment to help prevent the chances of falling or injury. Next, install the stops on both sides of the trailer. The stops act as both a stop as well as a securement for the box as it pulled onto the trailer. Then pull the box all the way to the locking stops. These stops also act as securement devices for the front box. At this time, if everything has been done properly, secure the box to the trailer using the straps that are located on both sides of the trailer. Once this operation has been completed, do a full walk around to check for any potential problems. Once you have satisfied that everything is secured properly, then and only then should you move the truck and trailer to a proper place to complete any ensuing paperwork. If you follow these techniques and always remember to be safe, you should have no problem loading or unloading a box. Okay, professional drivers, we're going to go through the proper procedures for unloading of a roll-off box trailer. The one thing that needs to be emphasized is the importance of adherence to safety. We can always get more equipment, but there is only one of you. So please always be aware of everything safety related as we go through these steps. Since this segment will be dealing with the unloading or dropping of a box from a roll-off trailer, we will start with our driver inside the cab. After the driver has positioned the truck and trailer where the customer wants the box dropped at, he then proceeds to secure the tractor from movement and then exits the cab. As you can see, he always exits the cab using 3 points of contact, which consist of 2 hands and 1 foot, or 2 feet and 1 hand. This is imperative to your safety. There have been many examples of drivers doing this improperly and ending up with a myriad of injuries, from sprained or broken bones to back injuries that can follow them for a lifetime. Is it worth it to risk the possibility of injury by exiting the cab in an improper manner? The next thing our driver does is he dons his PPE, or personal protective equipment. Again, this is done for safety and protection of our driver. It may at times seem to be overkill, but all it takes is for one seemingly small mishap for an injury to occur. The next step in the process is for our drivers to walk around the trailer. And as he's walking around, he is releasing all the straps that are securing the box. While he's in this process of walking around, he is also being mindful of the surroundings and any potential hazards that might occur. After our driver completes the walk around, using 3 points of contact, he climbs onto the bed of the trailer and releases the securement cable and replaces it with a cable that will aid in letting the box to be lowered to the ground. Next, our driver approaches the valve controls and begins the process of raising the rails by pulling the valve on the right towards him. As the rails reach the 45-degree angle, he then, using the valve lever, he begins to let the cable out that has been securing the box to the trailer, beginning to unwind, thusly letting the box slowly start its slide to the ground. The driver is letting gravity do most of the work at this point. You will notice that as the box touches the ground, the rear wheels of the box allows the box to move backwards a bit, which also lets the drivers raise the rails to continue the process of letting the box slide from the trailer. Once the rails have reached their maximum height and the box is firmly on the ground, our driver then positions himself between the rails and the box and removes the hook and chain that was securing the box to the trailer. After securing the chain to the trailer, he then gets back into the tractor and moves forward just a few feet to give more clearance between the now fully dropped box and the trailer. No need to go more than a few feet, as this is to just allow enough clearance between the box and the rails of the trailer so that the rails can be lowered without striking the box. Our driver then inspects everything to ensure that everything is safe to proceed. He makes sure that the chain is secured properly to the trailer, and he then goes back to the valve controls and takes the proper valve in hand and begins the process of rolling up the slack in the chain. Then he lowers the rails Then and only then does our driver remove his PPE and climb back into the cab to complete any necessary paperwork. Should you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to ask a supervisor or a trainer to go into more detail. Always remember, safety is number one.